another?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we've worked quite a bit on imitation learning, and we found it to be quite powerful in addressing like really challenging robotics tasks, including really dexterous tasks done by manual robots, surgical tasks, tasks on humanoid robots. But one thing that often presents a challenge for imitation learning systems is when you want to extend the horizon of the tasks that you want to solve. And in particular, the task that Lucy and I would like to talk about today is tasks like allowing a robot to pack 3 items into a plastic bag, or making a sandwich upon request, or performing a gallbladder removal procedure on a surgical robot, or tidying a bedroom. These are tasks that are really, really hard and are kind of traditionally tasks that might be approached through planning. And we're going to talk about how we might try to approach these sorts of tasks without traditional planning techniques, leveraging techniques in machine learning, and going beyond imitation learning. Now, imitation learning can be quite powerful for these sorts of tasks, but inevitably they might make mistakes. And each time you make a mistake, it means that, as the horizon grows, you're more likely to fail at the task. And so here's an example of a policy trained with imitation learning for this task of putting objects into the plastic bag. And we see that here it makes a mistake. And it doesn't like make this mistake every time, but it means that with some probability, if it makes this mistake, it's not able to recover. And so we're going to talk about an overarching framework that some works have also studied. So in some ways, many aspects of this framework aren't new, but we're going to be studying how this framework can allow robots to effectively solve really challenging, really long horizon tasks. So in particular, the framework we're going to build on is to train a hierarchical policy with language as the interface between a high-level and low-level policy. And so in particular, we have a robot, and our robot will be recording observations, and we want to select the actions that will allow the robot to make progress on the long horizon task. And we'll have 2 policies. We'll have a high-level policy that takes as input the observation and outputs a language command or atomic instruction that will allow the robot to make progress. Like in this case, the instruction it might say is to put the tape into the bag, or perhaps to rotate the tape clockwise in order to allow it to get into the bag. And then we'll have a low-level policy that takes as input that language command and the current observation and outputs target joint angles to actually execute on the robot. Both of these policies are going to be trained with imitation learning, and we often actually find that even doing this can outperform vanilla imitation learning on long horizon tasks. Both of these policies can also be pre-trained vision language models, so you can actually leverage a lot of the semantic knowledge and language following abilities of vision language models, and then fine-tune them to predict language and to predict actions on the robot data that we've collected. And in this talk, in the remainder of this talk, we'd like to focus on 2 specific questions around this framework. The first is, how can we efficiently improve long horizon performance beyond just collecting demonstration data? And second, can the robot not only do long horizon tasks, but do so following open-ended prompts that a human might describe? So first, let's talk about whether we could efficiently improve long horizon performance under this framework. So one option is just to collect more demonstrations, but in practice, you might need many, many demonstrations to do a very long horizon task. And one kind of key nugget of insight that you can apply to this framework is that for the high-level policy, you can actually update it using only language supervision, because the output of the high-level policy corresponds to the language instruction that the robot should do next. And if the low-level policy can follow a wide range of instructions and corrections, then you can actually improve this overarching system at long horizon tasks just by updating the high-level policy, by giving it examples of what it should do in different circumstances in language. And essentially what this corresponds to is doing Dagger on the high-level policy while freezing the low-level policy. Specifically how this works is we will be running the policy that we've trained with kind of offline demonstration data. Then we will have a person give an intervention when it looks like the robot is about to make a mistake. And then this intervention will override the high-level policy prediction and be fed into the low-level policy. And then beyond this, we can use this to actually allow humans to intervene and help the robot But we can also use these interventions, these verbal interventions, to update the high-level policy with gradient descent. And when we freeze the low-level policy and update the high-level policy, this allows it to figure out how to correct for its mistakes in a variety of different scenarios. We gave this system a fun name called Yell at Your Robot, or Yay Robot. And let's look at how this actually works on the robot. So after we fine-tune with language corrections, we find that the robot is able to self-correct. So in this case, it was about to make the mistake that it had made before, and it decides, the high-level policy kind of helps correct it. It says, move towards me, go higher, in order to get the pen in a position that's better able to insert into the bag. And then it's able to be successful and prevent itself from making a mistake through giving itself these verbal corrections. And as a result of fine-tuning the high-level policy, we find that the robot is far better at performing long horizon tasks. So here's a video of the full task of putting all 3 items into the plastic bag. And we see that the robot is able to, it makes some mistakes, but is able to correct for those mistakes and eventually mostly get all 3 items into the plastic bag. And this is a task that takes kind of quite a bit of time, around 2 minutes for the robot to complete. Now, you can also use the language interventions on the fly as well. And so here's an example where we're studying a different task of making trail mix and scooping trail mix into the bag. And it predicts that it's going to pick up some peanuts, move the scoop into the bag. And we see that if I pause the video right here, the robot is about to make a mistake, and it's about to actually pour the peanuts behind the bag instead of the bag, which is actually quite subtle from the robot's point of view. And so what we can do at this point is we can actually have the human intervene. And so instead of having these be the predictions of the high-level policy, this will now be human interventions that say, move the left arm to the left, go higher, move the scoop into the bag, and then give back control to the high-level policy to pour into the bag and complete the task. And then after fine-tuning on this correction data, we see that the robot is able to self-correct. So here, it's about to make the same mistake again, but then it realizes it's about to make that mistake and autonomously corrects itself to move higher and then scoop successfully into the bag. Quantitatively, we find that using only verbal corrections without any further demonstration data, we see a 20% gain in performance on long horizon tasks. And it closes a lot of the gap compared to using human verbal corrections, which means that we're able to really substantially improve the high-level policy, and the remainder of improvement needs to come from improving the low-level policy. And this is kind of the remaining kind of significant limitation of this work. And so I should really emphasize that these sorts of verbal corrections are much more efficient than collecting demonstration data. And so the ability to get this sort of gain in long horizon performance is quite significant because we can do it through only verbal corrections. So at this point, we've seen how we can efficiently improve long horizon performance, and I'll turn it over to Lucy, and she'll talk about how we can handle open-ended prompts for long horizon tasks.
Cool. Thank you, Chelsea. So if we take a step further and ask, can the robot respond to open-ended instructions and interjections? For example, if you want the robot to make a sandwich for you with your favorite ingredients, for example, here, apparently Chelsea wants a sandwich with roast beef and cheese. Then can the robot just do it? It turns out to be fairly hard because this requires good performance across all modalities, vision, language, actions at the same time. And then where does the interaction data even come from? And typically for robot language following, we would collect demonstrations, segment and label the demos with the task instructions. For example, here it could be pick up the tomato, and then train an instruction condition policy. So if we take the make sandwich task as an example, we would get the demonstration, get the atomic instructions such as pick up 1 piece of lettuce, and then train a policy, both a low-level policy and a high-level policy, to be able to predict and execute the atomic instructions. But this only uses a policy that can follow atomic commands. What about more complex prompts, or interjections, or situated corrections? So in order to handle open-ended language, one thing to note is collecting human-robot interaction is very costly and hard to scale. So here we propose generating synthetic data. That is to use LLMs to relabel data with hypothetical human prompts and interjections. So maybe the robot is getting grocery for you, and there are already skills such as pick up the Kit Kat. And then the LLMs could imagine all kinds of scenarios to lead to that pick up Kit Kat. For example, you ask the robot to get you a chocolate. And then we train on the synthetic traces to be able to interpret the open-ended prompts and interjections. So here, with a very similar framework, the high-level policy takes in the user prompt and is trained on the synthetic generated prompt, so it knows how to interpret it into something like pick up one slice of bread. So this enables the robot to be able to follow different prompts. For example, on the left, the robot is asked to make a ham and cheese sandwich. And on the right, the robot is asked to make a vegan sandwich, but no pickles. Note that in the data, we've never explicitly collected any of those tasks. But you can see that on the left, the robot correctly interprets the command. And even when the person asks, oh, can I get more pickles? The robot is able to get it. So to reiterate, there's a high-level policy taking whatever open-ended command the person gives to the robot and interpret it to something that the robot would understand, and then the low-level policy executed. And in a different buzzing task, we ask the robot to clean up the table, and in the data collection, we always clean up everything, like the dishes and as well as the trash. However, if we ask the robot to clean up only the trash but not the dishes, the high robot system will be able to interpret and do the right thing. It can also react to situated corrections. For example, in the grocery task that we talked about, if the person said, well, I want something that's sweet but not in the basket, and the robot will be able to get it. Cool. So in more of the experiments we ask, can existing foundation models do this kind of high-level robot reasoning out of the box? We measure two things. One is the instruction accuracy, which is how often does a predicted command align with the prompt. And the second is task progress, that is how much of the intended task does the robot complete. And we found that the frontier language models typically would struggle with visual understanding related to robotics. Okay, cool. So then we ask, can we translate the same framework to more long horizon complex tasks? For example, surgical procedures or long horizon manipulation in novel rooms. Okay, so over here, this is a gallbladder removal procedure, and we evaluated on 8 held out gallbladders on real pigs. And you can see that the Da Vinci robot is completely autonomous doing this procedure. And the top left, the high-level policy is issuing commands and corrections to the low-level policy. If we jump a little bit ahead, you can also see, well, the robot can autonomously do the cutting and the clipping, and eventually succeed in this very long horizon task. Then we also ask, can we translate this framework to long horizon mobile manipulation task? For example, we trained a PIO5 model by pre-training the low-level and high-level policies on diverse data, and then post-train the high-level policy on verbal instruction data. So with the same method, we are able to have the robot clean up entire, completely unseen bedrooms and kitchens. This is really interesting because typically we would collect data that's very much in domain, at least in the same room. But over here, we just booked some Airbnbs in San Francisco and brought the robot to those completely unseen rooms, and the robot will be able to just do it. On the video on the left, the human just asked the robot to clean up the bedroom, and then the high-level policy interprets it into the sub-steps for the robot to execute. We can also jump a little bit ahead. Cool. So to wrap it up, in this talk, we discuss long horizon planning without planning. We train a hierarchical policy with a language as an interface. And this enables the robot to improve on the fly from language corrections, handle open-ended instructions, and generalize to novel environments. Lastly, big thank you to the awesome folks in the Iris Lab and the physical intelligence team. Cool. Any questions?
All right, thanks so much, Chelsea and Lucy, for your amazing talk and cool demos. Any questions?
Thanks for the amazing presentation. So my question is, so basically this high-level policy is basically a vision language model. So how much this improvement can come from, a better foundational vision language model instead of, the fine-tuned to robotics?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we do see that there's a big performance improvement, especially for generalizing to different environments if we pre-train on the web data. So yeah, I think it could be very interesting future work for training or fine-tuning from even more powerful VLM backbones.
Hi, looking forward to what's after Hi Robot and Yay Robot. But my question is, are there any areas where high level and low level doesn't specify enough granularity for the task? And how did Dagger with just low level compare to Dagger on high level? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So I think there are definitely circumstances where it's hard to describe verbally like what the robot should do next, and you might want to use other modalities like key points, images, and so forth. And I think it's like pretty interesting. Like for example, in laundry folding, we don't use the same recipe because even for very long horizon tasks, because it's very hard to just say like pick up that particular part of the shirt and move it over there. Language isn't like a great representation for that. And so I think exploring other modalities for those kinds of tasks is really fascinating and interesting. And then in terms of high-level Dagger versus low-level Dagger, they kind of provide complementary benefits. A lot of it comes down to whether the bottleneck is the low-level policy or the high-level policy. In a lot of our experiments, we see that you need both of them to be quite good. And so I think it makes sense to potentially try to use Dagger at both levels. We haven't done explicit comparisons in this work because we only did Dagger on the high level, but we've also done some low-level Dagger with pretty promising results. So stay tuned.
Thanks so much. In the interest of time, we'll move on to the next speakers. Let's give another round of applause to Chelsea and Lucy.